The room was filled with a tense, heavy silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. My grandfather's will was being read aloud, the words echoing off the walls as if they were too important to be forgotten, too final to be ignored. I could hear the shuffle of papers, the nervous coughs of distant relatives who barely knew me, and the faint hum of the air conditioning struggling to fight the heat of the moment. Family members, legal advisors, board members, everyone sat still, waiting for the moment that would define everything. I sat there, numb, my eyes still puffy from hours of crying. My grandfather, the only person who ever believed in me, was gone. The man who always saw potential in me, no matter how small or how overlooked, had passed away, leaving a void I wasn't sure how to fill. The grief hit me in waves, each one pulling me deeper into despair. But as the lawyer continued, his voice steady, those waves of sadness began to mix with something else: confusion, shock, disbelief. The lawyer paused, glanced up, and adjusted his glasses. My mother shifted beside me, her posture so rigid I could almost hear her bones creaking. Her husband, Mark, sat next to her, looking as polished and perfect as ever. I hated how easily he fit into this family, even though he'd been around for less than a year. And then the words came. From this moment forward, Mark will be taking over the company, as per Mr. Thompson's instructions. I blinked. Mark? The man who had only entered our lives recently? The man who spent every moment since his arrival undermining me, telling anyone who would listen that someone my age wasn't capable of real responsibility? I looked around the room, hoping for some sign that this was a joke. But there was nothing, no reaction from the board members, no surprise from the extended family. It was as if they had already known, already accepted that Mark, the newcomer, would be running everything. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Grandpa had always said that the company would pass to me. He had taught me how to run it, how to build it, how to care for it as if it were my own. So, why would he change his mind at the last moment? Why would he leave everything to Mark, a man who barely knew the business, when he had a granddaughter who had been by his side for years, working, learning, preparing for this exact moment? I looked at my mother. Her face was hard to read, but her eyes were lit with something I couldn't quite place. Was it a relief? Triumph? It didn't matter. What mattered was that I wasn't being told I was in charge. I wasn't being told that everything Grandpa built was mine to continue. Instead, I was being pushed aside, as if I had no say in the matter. I opened my mouth, but no words came. It felt as though the room was closing in, the air growing thinner with each passing second. I looked back at Mark. He was smiling like this was exactly what he expected, as if this was already him, just a matter of time. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Was my entire life, all the work I'd done, all the promises Grandpa had made, nothing more than a forgotten detail in some legal document? Why? I managed to whisper, my voice shaking. Why him? The words felt weak, but they were all I could say. I needed an answer. This made no sense. And there it was, moments of clarity in the chaos. Why would she do this? Why would she betray me this way? Was this really about me? Or had this all been part of a larger, darker plan that I'd never even seen coming? I had no answers, only confusion and anger, and the cold realization that the fight for the company was just beginning. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he began reading Grandpa's will. His voice was steady, yet the words he spoke seemed to weigh heavier with each passing second. To my granddaughter, Emily Thompson, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all shares in Thompson Enterprises, my financial assets, and my personal properties, to be managed under her sole authority. The room was silent. I could feel every eye on me, the weight of their stares like 100-pound weight pressing down on my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I had just heard. I had expected the company to be left to me. Grandpa and I had discussed this countless times. But hearing it read aloud in front of everyone made it feel too real, too sudden. And then, like a shockwave, my mother's voice cut through the silence. "This is a mistake," she snapped, standing up so quickly her chair toppled over. There's no way he left it all to her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief and anger. This has to be some kind of error. He wouldn't have done this to me. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mother's reaction was like a punch to the gut. She was supposed to be the one in charge, the one running the company. I had never imagined she would react this way, her frustration spilling out in front of the entire family. But as I glanced around the room, I saw that no one seemed surprised. No one seemed shocked by the revelation that Grandpa had left everything to me. The board members, my uncles, my aunts, they all sat there with their lips pressed together, their eyes looking anywhere but at me. I could feel my heart racing, each beat louder in my ears as the weight of the moment settled over me. Grandpa's will, his decision, was real. It wasn't a dream, and it wasn't some misunderstanding. This was my future, my responsibility. Yet, in the midst of it, I couldn't help but feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether I would soar or crash. Grandpa knew I was the one who could take over, I whispered to myself, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. The bond we had shared over the years, the late-night conversations, the lessons he had taught me, seemed so distant now, so overshadowed by the cold reality of my mother's anger. She wasn't done yet. Emily isn't capable of running this company, she continued, her voice rising with every word. She's young, inexperienced. This is a billion-dollar business, not a game. I'm his only daughter. It should have been me. Her words hit me like a slap. She was trying to belittle everything Grandpa had taught me, everything I had worked for. She was trying to strip away my right to the company, to the future Grandpa had planned for me. But I wouldn't let her. I couldn't. This wasn't just a gift. This was my legacy. Grandpa had believed in me, and I was not going to let anyone take that away. I stood up, my voice steady but firm.
No, Mom.
Grandpa left this to me because he trusted me. I earned it. But she wasn't listening. All she could see was her own failure, her own need for control. Growing up, I often found myself standing in the shadows, invisible in a house full of noise and ambition. My mother, busy with her own life, barely had time to notice me. She was always focused on her career, her image, and the next step up the social ladder. She had little patience for me, let alone for anything I cared about. There were countless nights when I would stay up late, staring at the door to her office, wishing she'd come out and ask how my day went or offer any words of encouragement. But instead, she was always too preoccupied, too absorbed in her own world to give me even the smallest of her attention. In contrast, there was Grandpa. From a young age, he made me feel like I mattered, like I had the potential to do something big. He took me under his wing when my mother was too busy to notice. While my friends were out playing, I was by Grandpa's side in the office, learning the ins and outs of the business. He taught me how to manage the books, how to read the market, and how to take care of people. He believed in me, something I rarely heard from my mother. For him, I wasn't just the granddaughter. I was the next generation of the company he had spent his life building. Despite everything he taught me, my mother never saw it the same way. To her, the business was a means to an end, a way to secure her own future. She didn't see my hard work or my dedication. She saw only her own disappointments in me. When I told her I wanted to take over the company one day, she laughed it off as a childish dream. She made it clear that I wasn't cut out for the role. Her words were always wrapped in dismissiveness, her tone implying that I was naive, incapable of handling the responsibilities she herself never wanted to take on. Then there was Ben, my stepfather. From the moment he entered our lives, I could tell he saw me as a threat, as an obstacle to the control he wanted. He'd make offhand comments about how someone my age couldn't possibly understand the intricacies of running such a large business. Every time I spoke about my ideas or my plans, he'd shoot them down with a smirk, his words laced with condescension. Ben never believed in me, and as time passed, I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe he was right all along. But deep down, I knew Grandpa's lessons, his belief in me, were all I needed to keep moving forward. The tension in the room reached a breaking point when my mother slammed her hands on the table, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Emily, this is ridiculous," she snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. You need to step aside and let Ben take charge. He's the one who knows how to run a company like this. You're too young, too inexperienced. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my fists clenched at my sides. My mother's words stung, but they weren't unexpected. She had always belittled me, always dismissed my abilities, but hearing her say it in front of everyone, as if I were nothing, was a different kind of hurt. Ben, standing beside her, smirked, his arms crossed as if he were already in control. Your mother's right, sweetheart, he said, his tone condescending and patronizing. Running a business this size isn't something you just inherit. It takes real experience. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Ben had spent his entire life riding on the coattails of others, always trying to climb the ladder at any cost. He didn't know the first thing about hard work, about sacrifice. It was all about the power, the control, and right now he was trying to manipulate me into handing over something that didn't belong to him. I'm not handing it over, I said, my voice steady but firm. I wasn't going to back down.
Not this time.
Grandpa believed in me. He trusted me to take over the company. He taught me everything I know, and I'm not going to let you take that away from me just because you think you're better suited for the job. My mother's face twisted in disbelief. You think you can just waltz in and run everything? You've never had to make tough decisions. You've never been tested. Her words dripped with venom, and I could see the frustration and desperation building in her eyes. Mom, you never gave me the chance. I shot back, my voice rising. You never believed in me. You never gave me the support I needed. Grandpa did, and that's why he left everything to me. You can't change that. For a moment, she looked like she was about to explode, her face reddening with anger. But before she could speak, I added, and you know what else? Grandpa left you nothing, not even the house. It's mine too. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My mother's face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected, fear. She stared at me, her lips trembling, unable to process what I had just said. Ben's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing with rage. This is outrageous, he hissed, stepping forward as if he were about to lunge at me. You don't get to decide anything. You don't know what it takes to run this company. But I wasn't intimidated. I stood my ground, looking them both in the eye. Grandpa made his decision. He saw what you two were trying to do, and he made sure I was protected. I'm in charge now, and there's nothing you can do to change that. My mother's fury had reached its peak. She was shaking with rage, her hands clenched into fists. You think this is a victory? You think you've won, she spat, her voice low and filled with venom. You don't know what you're walking into. This company will eat you alive. I didn't flinch. Then I'll fight for it, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. I won't let anyone destroy what Grandpa built. The room was thick with tension, the silence suffocating. My mother's face twisted in fury, her lips pressed tight, as if she were holding back a scream. Ben was still glaring at me, his eyes filled with contempt. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the little girl they could push around. I have company now, and I was going to protect it, no matter what it took. The lawyer's voice broke the silence, calm and measured as he spoke again, his words lingering in the air. Mr. Thompson was aware of the challenges Emily would face as the new CEO. As such, he appointed a trusted advisory team to assist her through the transition period. This team will ensure she has all the support needed to step into her new role. The room seemed to freeze, the tension palpable. I could feel a small wave of relief washing over me. Grandpa had prepared for everything. He had known my mother, and Ben would try to manipulate me, and he had made sure I wasn't alone. I wasn't just inheriting a company. I was inheriting a team of experienced advisors who had been handpicked by Grandpa himself. For the first time in what felt like hours, I took a breath and allowed myself a moment of hope. My mother, on the other hand, didn't share my relief. I could see the way her face twisted, her expression hardening as the reality of the situation sank in. Her earlier confidence seemed to evaporate, replaced by a look of panic. The control she had tried to seize slipped further from her grasp with every passing second. I watched her eyes flicker nervously, then shoot a quick glance at Ben, who was standing beside her. The realization hit her hard. She could manipulate this situation. Grandpa's will was airtight. There was nothing she could do to change it. For all the years she had spent trying to take over, trying to make the company hers, Grandpa had seen through her. He had chosen me, and now she was powerless to stop it. The pride and arrogance that had once filled her now seemed to crumble, piece by piece, as she fought to maintain composure. Mr. Thompson left nothing to chance. The lawyer continued, oblivious to the quiet storm building in my mother. The advisory team is in place, and the legal documents are finalized. Everything has been arranged to ensure a smooth and successful transition. I could almost hear the walls closing in on my mother. Her expression went from anger to frustration to helplessness in the span of seconds. It was as if she could feel her control slipping, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The woman who had always held herself above everyone now found herself confronted with a reality she couldn't alter. Ben, standing just a few feet away, shifted uncomfortably, his confident facade starting to crack. The man who had acted like everything was under his control now seemed less sure of himself, his posture faltering slightly as the full weight of the situation settled over him. I could see the panic behind his eyes, the realization that he wasn't going to walk into the position of power he had so eagerly anticipated. For the first time, I could almost feel his confidence slipping away, replaced by something darker, uncertainty. My mother clenched her fists at her sides, but I could see the fight slowly draining from her. She had hoped to use this moment to take everything from me, but now it was clear she had lost. Grandpa had prepared for this, ensuring that I wouldn't be left vulnerable. And as I stood there, feeling the tide turn in my favor, I realized one thing for certain. This battle wasn't over, but I was finally ready to face it head-on. The storm started quietly, with a few whispers here and there in the media. But soon, those whispers became loud, invasive headlines. Young CEO takes over billion-dollar empire, but does she have what it takes? The inexperienced heir. Can a 25-year-old lead a global business? The articles piled up, each one questioning my qualifications, my ability to lead, and my right to hold the position that Grandpa had entrusted to me. The more I read, the more I felt the weight of the attack bearing down on me. Every line seemed to cast doubt on everything Grandpa had worked for, everything I had worked for. The pressure was mounting, and I couldn't ignore the way the media had quickly latched onto the story. It didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. My mother and Ben were behind this. They were the ones pulling the strings, feeding the media with their whispers of my inexperience, hoping to tear me down before I could even prove myself. It was as if they'd planned this sabotage from the start, using every opportunity to discredit me, to make sure that no one believed in my ability to run the company. The more I thought about it, the more I knew it had to be them. They couldn't let go of the control they thought they deserved. As if the press wasn't enough, the first board meeting under my leadership was a disaster waiting to happen. The moment I stepped into the room, I could feel the cold stares of the board members, the men and women who had worked under Grandpa for years. Their skepticism was palpable, their faces tight, their eyes wary. It was as if they were waiting for me to fail, just so they could say they had been right all along. One by one, they raised concerns about my age, my lack of experience, and the fact that I had never led a company of this size before. Each question felt like a sharp jab to the gut. "You're young, Miss Thompson," Mr. Holloway, one of the senior board members, said, his voice cold. "A company like this requires decades of experience, and you're still learning." His words were laced with doubt, but I could see the underlying message. They were testing me, waiting to see if I would crumble. The pressure was suffocating, but something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them undermine everything Grandpa had built, everything I had worked for. "I may be young," I said, my voice firm, "but I've been preparing for this my entire life. Grandpa trusted me, and I'm not going to let his legacy die because of your doubts." My words were confident, even though I could feel the fear creeping in. This was my moment to prove that I was ready, that I deserved this role. I couldn't back down now. The board members exchanged glances, but I held my ground, refusing to let their skepticism intimidate me. This was the moment I had been preparing for, and I would show them that I was capable of leading this company into the future. The challenge had been set, and I wasn't about to back down from it. The weight of the company felt like a 1,000-pound anchor dragging me under. Every decision, every move, felt heavier than the last. The press was relentless, the board was skeptical, and my mother's voice echoed in my mind, telling me I wasn't cut out for this. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one misstep could send me tumbling into failure. I had wanted this. I had worked for it, learned for it, prepared for it. But now, with it all in my hands, I wasn't sure if I was ready. Grandpa had always believed in me, but I was starting to doubt if I could live up to his expectations. It was one thing to dream of running the company, to think of myself as the one who could carry it forward, but now, the reality was different. The responsibility was enormous, and I couldn't help but feel the crushing pressure on my shoulders. Every move I made, every decision I had to make, felt like it was being watched by everyone, ready to tear me apart if I failed. But I wasn't alone in this. Grandpa had set up a team of trusted advisors, people who had worked alongside him for years. I reached out to them, desperate for guidance. They were calm and steady, offering their knowledge and experience without hesitation. They reminded me that I wasn't starting from scratch. Grandpa had left a legacy, and they were there to help me carry it forward. Their reassurance gave me a glimmer of hope, a reminder that I wasn't in this alone. They had been there with Grandpa when things were tough, and they were here now, willing to help me navigate the storm. Still, despite their support, the emotional toll of the situation wore on me. I kept replaying my mother's words in my head. "You're too young. You'll never be able to handle this." I could see her disappointment in her eyes and hear the bitterness in her voice. And then there was Ben, always so sure of himself, dismissing my every idea as naive. The betrayal stung, deep in my gut. I had spent so many years trying to prove to her that I was capable, trying to make her proud, only to be told that I was never good enough. How could she not see? How could she not understand that I had worked for this, that I had earned it? But I couldn't let their betrayal control me. Grandpa had taught me something that was starting to take hold again, the power of resilience, the importance of sticking to what I knew was right. He had built this company with his blood, sweat, and tears, and he had trusted me to take it forward. He had always believed that true leadership wasn't about age or experience. It was about vision, integrity, and the willingness to work hard, even when the odds were against you. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of his lesson. This wasn't about proving my mother or Ben wrong. It was about carrying Grandpa's legacy, about leading with strength, and about showing everyone that I was capable of handling what had been entrusted to me. I was going to prove them all wrong, not just for myself, but for Grandpa. The moment I decided to take control of the situation, I felt a shift within myself. No longer would I be the passive bystander in my own story. I was going to fight for the company Grandpa had left me, and I was going to do it on my terms. I reached out to Grandpa's trusted advisors, the ones he had handpicked for this very purpose, and began working with them to develop a clear plan to restore the company's reputation and secure its future. They had the experience, and I had the vision. Together, we would turn this around. The first step was to address the negative press head-on. We couldn't afford to let the media define who I was, or what I was capable of. The articles, the headlines, they had all painted me as an inexperienced, naive young woman who didn't deserve to be in charge. But I knew better. I knew what Grandpa had seen in me. So, we arranged a key media interview, one that would allow me to set the record straight. I was going to speak directly to the public, show them my qualifications, my passion, and most importantly, Grandpa's intentions for the company. The interview went smoothly, and I was able to highlight the years of training Grandpa had given me. I spoke about the time I had spent in the business, the lessons I had learned, and how Grandpa had always believed in me. I didn't hide from my age, I embraced it. I was young, yes, but that didn't mean I lacked the knowledge or determination to lead. I reminded the world that Grandpa hadn't just left me the company because I was family. He had chosen me because he knew I could take it further than anyone else could. By the time the interview ended, the tone of the media started to shift. The skepticism was still there, but it was being drowned out by a growing sense of respect. The real battle, however, was waiting for me in the boardroom. The next meeting was looming, and I knew it was going to be a test of everything I had. The board members were still skeptical, and I could feel their doubts thick in the air. But this time I was ready. I walked into that room with my head held high, prepared to show them that I was more than capable of leading this company. I addressed their concerns head-on, showing them that I had a plan for the future and the support to carry it out. I wasn't a child playing dress-up. I was the CEO of this company, and I was going to prove it. But as the meeting wore on, I began to see the signs of sabotage. Subtle, quiet moves that didn't make sense unless there was a hidden agenda. That's when I uncovered the truth. Ben and my mother had been secretly trying to manipulate company decisions, attempting to steer the business in their favor for their own gain. The realization hit me hard, but I wasn't surprised. They had always wanted control, and they had thought they could take it from me without anyone noticing. Now, it was time to expose them for who they truly were. The fight wasn't just about me proving myself. It was about stopping them from destroying everything Grandpa had built. I was going to take back what was mine and ensure that no one, not even family, could tear it apart. The tension in the boardroom was unbearable. Every seat was filled with powerful individuals, their eyes fixed on the long table in front of them. Today was the day that everything would be decided. The future of the company, my future, and whether I would be allowed to keep the position Grandpa had entrusted to me. Ben, with his usual confidence, was sitting at the head of the table, his posture poised as if he already believed the outcome was a foregone conclusion. My mother sat beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line, trying to maintain the illusion of control. "Clearly, we have a situation that needs to be resolved," Ben began, his voice smooth and calculated. "This company needs strong leadership, and I believe I am the one best suited to guide it through these challenging times. Emily is too inexperienced to handle such a massive empire." His words were laced with the same arrogance I had grown to despise, as though he had already won and was simply waiting for the board to acknowledge it. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. I stood up, feeling the weight of the room on me, and I addressed the board, my voice steady but firm. "I've worked for this company my entire life. Grandpa believed in me, and he left me for a reason. I'm not here to play games or to back down." Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I slid the evidence I had gathered across the table. Emails, texts, and call logs, proof that Ben had been working behind the scenes to undermine the company, negotiating with competitors to weaken our position. The room fell into stunned silence as the board members glanced at the documents in disbelief. Ben's face turned pale, his confident facade cracking for the first time. "This is a lie," he shouted, his voice rising in panic. But it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. The board members exchanged shocked looks, murmuring amongst themselves. They had all trusted him, believed he had been working for the best interests of the company. But now, the truth was laid bare. My mother stood up, her face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You think you've won?" she spat at me, her voice thick with venom. "You're making a mistake, Emily. You're letting him manipulate you. This isn't what Grandpa would have wanted." But her words fell flat. The damage had been done. The betrayal had been exposed, and it was no longer a question of what Grandpa wanted. It was a question of what was best for the future of the company. As the board members processed the evidence, Mr. Holloway, the most senior member, stood up and addressed the room. "It's clear that we've been misled. Ben's actions have jeopardized the company, and for that, he has no place in this boardroom. The vote is clear. We support Emily." The board members raised their hands one by one in agreement, each vote sealing Ben's fate. He stood there, unable to speak, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. My mother's eyes burned with fury, but even she knew there was nothing more she could do. I had won. The board's vote was unanimous, and I was officially confirmed as the CEO of Thompson Enterprises. The weight that had been pressing on my chest lifted, replaced with a sense of triumph. I had faced betrayal, sabotage, and doubt, but I had come out on top. I had proven that Grandpa's faith in me wasn't misplaced. As the meeting came to a close, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The company was mine to lead, and I would carry Grandpa's legacy forward, stronger than ever. As I stood in the heart of Hartley Enterprises, the weight of the moment finally sank in. The company was mine, not just by inheritance, but by battle, by every decision, every ounce of effort I had put into proving that I was worthy. The fight hadn't been easy. It had been grueling, full of doubt, betrayal, and sabotage. But now, as I looked around the boardroom, the same room where I had once felt like an outsider, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had earned my place here. I had earned the right to lead this company into the future. Grandpa's faith in me had never wavered, and now I understood what he had seen in me all along. I wasn't just taking over a company. I was carrying on his legacy, continuing the work he had spent his life building. It wasn't just about running the business. It was about honoring the man who had given me the tools to succeed. The lessons he had taught me, the importance of leadership, determination, and vision had prepared me for this moment. Grandpa had believed in me when no one else did, and I couldn't let that belief go to waste. I thought about all the years I had spent by his side, learning from him, working with him. Those moments were no longer just memories. They were the foundation of everything I was doing now. I wasn't just the CEO of Hartley Enterprises. I was the keeper of Grandpa's dream. Every decision I made, every move I made, would be a reflection of his belief in me. The responsibility was heavy, but it was one I was ready to bear. As I walked out of the boardroom, my mother and Ben were waiting for me, standing just outside the door. I could see the frustration in my mother's eyes, the anger that had been building in her since the moment Grandpa had passed. Ben, his face flushed with humiliation, stood next to her, trying to maintain his composure. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The fight had taken everything I had, but it had also shown me something important. I wasn't just the naive girl they had once tried to control. I had grown stronger. I had become a leader in my own right. I stopped in front of them, my voice calm but unwavering. This company is mine, and I won't give it up. You both made your choices, and I've made mine. I won't let you tear down what Grandpa built just because you want control. My mother's eyes flickered with disbelief, but there was no more power in her words. Ben didn't say anything, his usual arrogance replaced by a hollow silence. They had lost. I had won. As I walked away from them, I felt the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. This was a new beginning, a new era for Hartley Enterprises. I had overcome everything they had thrown at me, and I had secured my place as the rightful CEO. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready to lead with everything I had. This was my legacy, and I was going to make sure it lasted for generations to come.